Who was the worst person that you had to endure to keep the relationship with your so? My so's father, now father-in-law. The man spent every penny he had on nothing, no idea where it went, and then sold all his assets to spend that too. He had access to my so's bank account and would empty it completely every month. When we got married, I insisted that she remove his access from her accounts. That caused huge family arguments. During one of the arguments he asked me what I thought that he had allowed me to marry his daughter. The answer was so that I could give him my salary and he would give our family an allowance to live off. He claimed it was cultural. They are Chinese. But if that was so, the daughter would be cut off, as the son is supposed to look after the parents, and he has a successful son. But he saw an opportunity to make money for himself. He has mortgaged his house to the hilt and has spent it all. Hundreds of thousands with nothing at all to show for it, and now really has no money. At one point he said, "I don't know why I had children if they won't pay for me to live the way I want." I am not unkind, and if he was truly hard up through no fault of his own, I would, of course, help. But he sold a string of properties that he was getting rental income from and wasted the money, and wasted all his investments. If I gave him any money he would just waste it and then demand more. I started by giving him money, but after seeing what he does with it, no more. I would guess gambling, since drugs would probably be obvious. My bill is a huge douche. The guy tries to make everything a competition. When I told him a funny but embarrassing story about myself, he started bragging about how he would never do something so dumb. I only told him that story so he would relax and stop trying so hard, but instead it only made him more arrogant. I hate those kind of people. Her older brother, annoying 30-year-old that lives with his parents, has multiple children he doesn't support, believes I owe him because I'm banging his sister. Once moron was getting pulled over by police for speeding, he panics and tries to run from cops. Gets arrested and sent to jail. When we bought my her car, a Infiniti Coupe, he borrowed it and went and traded her brand new rims and tires for some crappy 20 no-name rims with old tires on them. This was the angriest moment of my life. My old boyfriend had the worst family. His mother and siblings all thought I wasn't good enough for him even when we had dated for 3 years. He was unemployed and failed the same education twice while I had work and 2 diplomas. His younger sister was great though, so once for her 14th birthday she wanted to have a giant sleepover and she invited me. Sadly I had to work that weekend so I couldn't come. The girl moved her party up a week so I could ask for time off from work. So I show up. They lived about an hour from my house, and her mother had decided the sleepover would be at the older sister's house, and she didn't want me in her home. I have never done anything to her. My boyfriend wasn't even home that day because I came over for his sister, so I spent all night alone in their house, excluded from a party I was invited to. Wow, what the heck. My so's brother. He's a junkie we can't afford to feed and who we can't emotionally deal with because we have stress from our bills and kids and an illness in the family. I think he's trying to sneak move in right now and I can't live with him again. He reminds me of an abusive ex I had years ago, and him being in the same building makes me anxious. The first time I met him was right after I called the cops on him for laying his hands on his mother. She called me, crying, from the bathroom because he had choked her and slammed her into a wall because she told him not to bully her dogs. The cops made him leave. A few months later he moved back in with her after we had moved in with her so she could afford the bills. I called the cops on him again for putting his hands on a girl he had been seeing while he was in our house. The cops didn't make him leave the second time. He tried to sneak move another girl in. We tried to make things work, but after we got our tax return back, our car crap out, and we started looking for another. He offers to go half and half on a car. I plead with my so not to trust the brother. He pleads with me to trust him. I relent, and we go half and half on the car. We finally can't take dealing with the brother after 2 more months and ask him and his girl to leave. They took the car, got a title loan, refinanced the loan to double what they got out of it, and never paid us back. It got repoed. We had to scrounge for money to get bikes so we could make it to the nearest grocery store in less than an hour. It was awful. In the 7 months we lived with him, he paid his portion of the rent once. because he stole money from some poor girl he met online. I felt so bad when I found out about it. I love my so, but his brother is one of the 3 most terrible people I've ever met. I have no words. Scum of the earth. That guy. My mom. She was a drug addict and had been for about 10 years. She decided she didn't like my girlfriend and started doing everything she could to keep us apart. She wouldn't let her come over to our house and would try her best to keep me from going over there. Every time the subject got brought up she would freak out. Those years were pretty tough. My parents are now divorced and my then girlfriend is now my wife. Your mum sounds like a bit of a see you next Tuesday. His best friend, Tim. Tim was obviously in love with my ex and often begged said ex to send explicit photos of himself. Whenever we would hang out as a group, Tim would be slightly antagonistic towards me in enough of a passive-aggressive way that I couldn't really say anything about it. When I confronted Tim about the photos, he would act like I was making a big deal out of nothing with this crap-eating grin plastered across his face. As far as I know, ex never sent him anything. Still, Tim being a dong to me and ex not wanting to deal with it just added to the mess that was our relationship. I hate to say it, but it sounds like your ex is part of the problem. If you're in a committed relationship, and their best friend is always begging for nudes, and your so doesn't put a foot down on it or otherwise end the friendship, they're willfully not cutting out the problem. My ex had the most blisteringly awful mother I could imagine. She was an only child and because she had type 1 diabetes was coddled her entire life. Even in her 40s 50s she behaved like a cross between a spoiled 6-year-old and a mean girl's high schooler. She was always sick, and always with something new. She had doctor's appointments every week or 2. Every time I saw her she had something else. Thyroid issues. It's not my fault I'm fat. Low blood pressure. It's not my fault I'm always on my butt. She declared herself legally blind. It's not my fault I never leave the house. This was amid countless colds, mystery illnesses, temper tantrums that were somehow a medical issue. When I first met her I felt bad. Over the years it was exhausting. She was never too sick to go on vacation. Her husband would take her 4 times a year and she'd miraculously recover in time. And then she'd come back and claim ridiculous stuff like the dirty Egyptian banknotes made her sick. This is how you know she was real, because who could make something that stupid up? She also thought that non-Christians shouldn't get time off work at Christmas because they are always on vacation when they have their fake Christmases, and because she never worked you could even explain that if somebody did take vacation for Eid or Hanukkah, they'd take it from vacation allowance, whereas most places actually shut down over Christmas. Even though the woman was in her early 50s the last time I saw her, she still regularly had her lunch brought to her by her own mother. She also had her breakfast prepared for her by her husband. Worse still, her daughter was born with an extremely mild physical disability. The biggest impact it had was that she had a limp, and she had gradually been coaching her into the same sort of dependence. She went from a very normal college student to somebody who is too scared to catch a bus and refuses to drive because of her condition. The daughter is now in her 30s and has her dad give her a rides to and from work each day. I can't describe how happy I was when I realized that this woman would no longer be in my life. It was like waking up one morning and realizing I could fly or something. Obvious answer. His freaking mother. She was a childish, drunk, fat alcoholic. She would be mad at me all the time for no freaking reason. She was too attached to her son and wanted attention. Not once did I ever play into, oh your mom is mad at me and not gonna say hi when I go over, then don't be. I seriously will not indulge you at all. They are the worst. No girl is good enough for her boys type of crap. She always used to put me down, just like her crappy son. Wife's childhood best friend, a male, who was in love with her since he was a kid. They were best friends and acted very much so. I wasn't jealous and she very clearly stated as such early on in our relationship. A few weeks into dating I finally meet Tony. Nice guy, very different than myself. We get to chatting and having a few beers together on our first meeting. My so ducks out for a minute and he changes like Mr. Hyde. She is my girl and I plan on marrying her. You just need to understand that and I recommend you just get the frick out of here. I wasn't even fazed by it really, as we were just casually dating at that time. I didn't mention it to her either, but I stuck around and we became a number. He still treated me nicely in front of her, but it was clear he wasn't happy about the whole thing. He finally got the message on the birth of our daughter that I wasn't a one-hit wonder. Sounds like someone you should really keep your eyes on. His mother. She was a narcissist and all-around crappy person. She would lie about everything to make herself look better, which her son learned and he did as well. She made her own daughter's wedding about her instead of her daughter, making a huge scene over having to see her ex-husband again. It was a whole bunch of WTF. Narcissists. Bride at every wedding. Corpse at every funeral. My ex-girlfriend's sister is among the worst people I've ever met. Going back a few years, she was an utterly self-absorbed 19-year-old with very little empathy and even fewer morals. She was a goddamn savant at pushing people's buttons. She knew exactly what to say and when to say it to thoroughly dismantle your self-confidence. She also had no trouble with doing so at the drop of a hat. Anytime she felt she wasn't getting her way, she would argue and argue to the ends of the earth until everyone involved caved and gave her what she wanted. This was one way her nastiest powers served her exceedingly well. She would also fly off the handle at the whole family with little warning. She was thoroughly convinced that, as a worldly and intelligent 19-year-old, she should be afforded every freedom and every measure of respect. Yet she flatly refused to take on any of the responsibilities that come with adulthood, including but not limited to cooking, cleaning or contributing to household finances, despite living with her parents whose budget was already stretched. The merest suggestion that she should contribute meaningfully in any way was met with an outburst which did not calm down until the suggestion was retracted. When told she could contribute or leave the household, she would rant and rave that her parents still had a responsibility to her and they could not turf her out, despite her previous assertions about being a worldly, intelligent and independent woman. She would frequently take the opportunity to dine out at the family's expense, refusing to understand why we thought it poor form to order 3 of the most expensive drinks on the menu and 3 courses on top of that, while my ex-girlfriend, myself and the other siblings strained our own budgets to ensure we paid whatever we could, whether we were asked to or not. She would scarcely offer to add so much as a 20 to the total sum and would react poorly if asked. In the event something went wrong, she explained furiously and at length why she was the only one affected. She was the only one who had places to be and things to do. Everyone else was held responsible for ensuring her needs were met, regardless of whether or not the issue was within their control. When someone pointed out that they too were disadvantaged, she would snap, maintaining that they couldn't possibly understand the position she was in and the pressure she was under. It's been a few years since I've been in contact with the family. I do hope she's grown up and done a little introspecting, but in all honesty, I highly doubt it. Her dad. Dude was a cop and once told us a story about answering a disturbance call at a grocery store that involved a 16-year-old black kid that was working there. Her dad's partner tased this young man and he ended up dying. Her dad laughed when he finished the story. Side note, later found out her great-grandfather was a Nazi that worked at a concentration camp. Great family all around. My own parents actually. I know this probably shouldn't have come as a surprise, but when I told my parents I was engaged to my husband they freaked out. He is black and I am white and my parents pretty much don't know any black people except for him. They had been pretty racist from the start of our relationship, but I figured that by the time our engagement rolled around they had gotten used to the idea. I was not prepared for the things they did and said after that announcement. Now I barely speak to them anymore and I am hoping to continue pulling away from them. Their reaction to my husband was actually a huge eye-opener, and if it hadn't happened I would not have realized the degree to which my parents were manipulative, controlling, emotionally abusive buttholes. His father always yelled at his son and never asked if he needed help. His dad has serious anger issues and my so wants nothing to do with him now. His dad yells at him while he has guests over. I can't stress how much I actually hate his father. His dad yells at him while he has guests over. I can't think of anything more humiliating than this. My mom's ex-boyfriend went out of his way to pick fights, sometimes physically, when I had friends over, and then made fun of me for not having friends anymore. I did. I just never invited them around him. Thank God my mother ditched him. My so's mom. She has a distrust in men. For good reason. but holds it against me even though I take care of her daughter and grandson. So hurtful to have your parenting called into question in your own house and know you can't say anything back because the cops might be called because she feels threatened by a logical and adult conversation. So hurtful to have your parenting called into question in your own house and know you can't say anything back because the cops might be called because she feels threatened by a logical and adult conversation. Once she starts that crap, start surreptitiously recording it. If she tries to go nuclear, call the cops, have her removed, and if she tries to pull that stunt, show him the video. Current So's mom is probably the worst. One of those wonderfully judgmental Christians that doesn't go to church herself. I'm a worse fit for my So than her previous BF, who was verbally and physically abusive, and is in prison after having sex with a 13-year-old girl, because at least he went to church. Lots of toxicity. Tells So not to visit but then complains about So never coming down. Small town gossipy, but hides important information from my So. They do a lot to help us, and thankfully my So lets me stay at home most of the time she goes down there. So could be worse and could have to deal with it more often. Previous So's brother is a good contender though. Just one of those macho teenage, at the time douchebag idiots. His uncle who lived with him and his family, we were 17. And he never used to bath or brush his teeth and the family didn't know how to tell him so he just stayed dirty. Every weekend I had to make conversation and try not to gag. The family were also good friends with these fairly wealthy people and they used to come over for lunches all the time. The mother was really sweet but the father was an absolute pervert who liked to talk about how much money he had. His kids were all spoilt and only talked about the shopping trips they had been on and how much better their insert whatever is because it cost 5x what mine did : He ended up cheating on me and had a child a year later. Her best friend Haley. First time I met her I knew she was a little off. She had a child really early, had only been with one guy, would openly talk about wanting to cheat but being too afraid, random crap. She would literally call my ex daily and when she didn't answer she would snap her to check if she was screening her calls. My ex would tell me all the time how annoying Haley can be and how she basically only hung out with her because she felt bad for her. I didn't understand that logic, but wasn't going to be a bad BF so I would hang out with them whenever and in reality my ex couldn't be too picky with her friends. Well it turns out Haley didn't like me for whatever reason and wanted my ex to start going out with one of her friends we will call Carl. Me and my ex had been together for 4 years at this point. Whenever Haley knows I am not going to come inviting Carl over. Carl of course comes over knowing he has no car and my ex will drive him home. Alcohol is always present. This had been going on for 2 months and I thought it was just odd. Finally Haley getting them plastered and driving them to her house telling her they should have sex so she can experience something different. They didn't have sex that night. I accidentally showed up, but when I saw her text to my ex saying that I knew that she had gotten to live out her fantasies through my ex and I was not about it. His mom. She started off by criticizing me or downplaying my achievements in front of him or their other family. She would always give me backhanded compliments in front of him. From "that's a really nice sweater, it manages to compliment a figure like yours to you have a surprising amount of natural motherly instinct for a girl with your problem. I worked with kids for a while and I'm incapable of having children myself." Then once me and the boyf were talking in another room and she just came in from eavesdropping and said something along the lines of "she's lying. Bitchy girls like that say things along those lines to manipulative hardworking men into. We were discussing a vacation together. I asked to borrow a small amount of money for it because I didn't work when the kids were on summer vacation and wouldn't be paid again till I started working again in the fall. My girlfriend's cousin is a strung out doppy fiend that constantly hits on me. She knows he makes me uncomfortable, but 9 times out of 10, when we go to her parents' house, he is always there. My father-in-law is a complete oaf. I don't hate him, but I can only bear him in small doses. He makes a face when he pushes farts out, loudly and at restaurants, and then doesn't say "excuse me." Last time they visited just this May he told my husband, "Maybe your wife is being open to a threesome." After we mentioned that we lived in a neighborhood with a lot of lesbian couples. Doesn't say please or thank you. At dinner, "Give me a roll. Where's my water," etc. The water is now and has always been in the fricking sink. He's from old Brooklyn. He's 72 and talks incredibly loud and rudely over everyone. He says Muva instead of mother. If we're driving around in the car and he's a passenger, he'll read every goddamn sign we go by. Potbelly sandwiches, LA, Tan, Lakeview Dental, Exit 4B Kennedy Expressway, Ceviche Latin Fusion Restaurant. It's maddening. So he's not abusive or the likes. He's just really obnoxious. Almost sounds like a comedy skit. Her parents, both of them, her brothers and sisters, have perfect lives in their eyes. We have been married 15 years. We were the last ones to marry. She is 14 years younger than her oldest sibling, and we are the only ones still married. My ex-brother-in-law would get a citation for busting a person with a bag of weed, and they would ask, why doesn't your husband ever get awards for being a firefighter? The brother-in-law tried to be a firefighter first but failed the exam. It was a family secret because they didn't want me to look better. Her parents are big Tea Party Pentecostal people. My family is Catholic. I am in a union which they hate. Her parents faked a disability to get assistance, but they call it their pension. Her dad never had a job for more than a few years. They cheated on taxes because they believe income tax is not constitutional. They weigh about 700 pounds combined. My wife is super liberal, which they blame on me. Her siblings homeschool their kids. Ours are in public school. Yet, my 9th grader is 2 full years ahead in math. Both kids are in the gifted program. Both are in orchestra and sports. The oldest has won merit badge from his Eagle Scout at 13 years old. I can't stand my in-laws. My kids and wife can't either. We are going out of town for Christmas just so we have an excuse to be away. We have to explain to our kids every time they visit them how some crazy political conspiracy is not true, like Sandy Hook being fake. My wife doesn't want to write her parents off. Yet, we don't understand why he parents think it is appropriate to talk politics with their 11 and 13-year-old. Not really a person, but it's my husband's dog. I like dogs, but she has a severe separation anxiety problem when it comes to me, and it's a very trying and tedious problem. She is so attached to me and twitchy, and I don't even know what happened that made her bond to me like this. I feel bad because she is a sweet, loving dog and it's not her fault she's crazy, but it is very frustrating and it's a lot to handle, and it makes me not like her very much. My ex-Mill, toxic conniving bee. She now enjoys most of her holidays alone. Reap what you sow. Fran, you drunken, white trash, abusive pose. Have another drink. I've never met a Fran that wasn't a white trash alcoholic. Definitely her parents. Somehow they managed to embody every negative stereotype about both Jewish people and Republicans. Food got sent back at almost every meal out. They had money but were notorious cheapskates. Found religion late in life and cherry-pick all the wrong beliefs, and completely subscribed to the Obama birther theory. Plenty of non-stereotypical things to hate about them too. Her dad could not eat food with his mouth closed. My biggest beef by far. I basically bit my tongue off throughout the course of that relationship. Most of my friends are Jewish, as are most of my sister's friends and brother-in-law. It's hard for me to even fathom a conservative Jew, other than like Hasidics. My first BF in high school had an absolutely insane mother. She would try to pick fights with her son over perceived behavioral issues while I was there and would look at me like, aren't you going to back me up here? Lady was a self-proclaimed feminist and just assumed I'd side with her just because we're both female. She'd treat her son like garbage because he was male and was convinced he was abusive because he didn't respect her. He usually just walked away when she was in one of her moods and started shrieking about how horrible he is to her. If she took us somewhere, she'd humiliate us by finding any reason to get free stuff. We're getting coffee at Dunkin'? It wasn't made right. It should be free. At a restaurant? The food was cold? It should be free. My BF would have enough and tell her stop it, and that would end in a public crap show. We eventually broke up for unrelated issues. He joined the military to get away from her after high school, and last I heard he was happily married with a daughter of his own far away from his insane mom. I'm glad things worked out for him. Her family. They all hated the native guy. I have a steady job, working over 100 hours every 2 weeks. Treated her well, even spoiled her a little. Yet, I wasn't good enough for her. In the end she cheated on me, so I'm pretty sure I dodged a huge bullet in the end. Yeah, you did. Sorry it happened anyway, man. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.